Welcome back, unless it's your first time, in which case, welcome forward? Well, whatever floats your boat. I am Doc Ito, your presenter for episode 22 of the Civ Battle Royale X, Season 3, A Cylinder in Flux. Ages pass, wars rage, tech advances, wonders are built, and shenanigans happen. Your narrator for today is BV, or Anarcho Balkan on Reddit, aka the concept of being annoying made flesh. You may remember my narrations of episode 18 of Season 2 and episode 7 of Season 3, as well as from other stuff you can read in the opening slides of those. I'm not gonna bore you with the same details over and over again. And since Neurosat didn't want to elaborate on the coin flip, I'm gonna respect his wishes and not elaborate. Hope there's no hard feelings, Nero. Honestly, as excellent as Varea's maps are, and they are, I think I prefer Fiona Lungora's more. Every time I view one, I just have fun trying to read all the names. Take a good look at this map, for after we get into the episode proper, it will never be the same again. By the time I'm typing this, 11th of March, there is no OC, but since Orange is always there with her American Dreams series, I'm thinking of already calling it here that it's going to be on the slide, and that it's very good, as it always is. Really looking forward to what she has for us this week. And she delivered. Mojave is approaching menacingly towards Central America. Also, congrats to the Pacific Ocean for coming out as bisexual. And here's our Ko-Fi donators appreciation slide. The average member of the CBR community is amazing, but the people on screen right now are even more so. This project and future ones like this wouldn't exist without you guys. Thank you. The first in the power rankings this week is Tuva, with Turkey a close second. But here I want to focus on a different civ, namely Rio de la Plata. They had the largest change in ranking from the previous PRs, rising 6 spots. The screenshot shows us an event in the CBRX that gives us a small, blurred view into an alternate timeline, the RDLP much closer to living up to its Episode 0 top ranking. Ultimately, given their small size and outdated tech, they will never reach those heights, but as much as I prefer the Inca over RDLP, I have to admit it's nice to see a glimpse of what could have been. Into the action we go. Here we see American troops approaching Windsor. Honestly, since I forgot America was among the gaggle of civs that DOW'd Vermont last week, I was confused if this was a war or some open borders shenanigans, but then I noticed that several of the American units have sustained damage, so war it is. I guess a better indication that it's a war probably would have been that Vermont doesn't have what was, by their standards, a unit carpet anymore. That Vermont fact was somehow more memorable to me. I guess the fact that Windsor is undamaged threw me off. Off to the right side of the screen, we see the American Brandenburgian naval scuffle, though this angle doesn't allow us to gauge who has the advantage. Here we get a better picture of the scuffle, and here it is easier to gauge the advantages and disadvantages. But only a moment too late, as we just watched them make peace. That American fleet was lucky to have found itself at peace before Brandenburgian reinforcements could arrive. Long swordsmen, presumably originally Yemeni, have launched a revolt at the Yemeni-Turkish border between Sana'a, Mersin, and Kayseri, pillaging the countryside at both sides of the frontier. Yemeni knights, apparently enjoying open borders with Turkey, are moving to apprehend them and quash the revolt. No doubt the Turks' small but technologically superior garrison forces are going to join in on the action too. Judging from the open borders and the current cooperation, I don't think Yemen is going to listen to fans' demands to invade Turkey's soft underbelly anytime soon. Here we have an image of Aotearoa and Eastern Australia, and I had such high hopes for you, Maori. But you didn't garrison your Australian colonies properly, and were stupid enough to give Te Tokanganui away in a peace deal. Such is life. At least your capital is the biggest city on the slide. Here's a slide of Hawaii, and honestly, I'm not sure what's happening here. Guiyang, Ming's vacation resort, is the biggest city here. The Mojave are kinda chillin', and what's with all those damaged ships? 5 Kokangis, 2 Inca, 2 Mojave, 1 Ming, and 1 Yemeni ship have all sustained damage. Is it a penalty for being on the ocean too long? Or is there a war I've missed? Nope. No war here according to the info sheet. The Arapaho, often criticized for their small army, I may not have voiced such critique, but I've certainly thought it, seems to be starting to maybe, potentially, heed our words, ? They're rebuilding their Gulf fleet after that fiasco against Central America, of all people, and have built a large army of mixed tech levels in the Nichi Nechini Kwahari Ho'u Niit Ko'us Ii belt. Not enough to satisfy us subdwellers, but it's a start at least. While the Rio Platense and Inca troops continue to duke it out on the plains and hills of the Platine Basin, Kayapo is mostly, though not completely, content to watch them go from the sidelines. To satisfy themselves, they decided to pluck a citadel on the coast, south of San Salvador, and they've outsourced the defense of the citadel to an Indonesian scout. A very unorthodox way to profit from a war, but okay. Over here, we see the northern front of what has become the last remaining of Lithuania's eastern wars. The Permians are advancing into Lithuanian territory, dealing a tiny bit of damage to Onyxii. Both sides have the units to hold the front, but lack reinforcements. The fact they're fighting in the tundra and snow, pockmarked with rivers, hills, and forests, only further worsens the logistics of this front. North Korea and Mori seem to have bled each other's navies dry, at least the parts thereof that are actually able to reach the front. North Korea should count its lucky stars that Ming has too many ships for Mori to navigate more than 2 ships at a time to Jeju, and that the Gokturks closed their borders to Mori. Leading what's left of the North Korean attack force on the undamaged Mori capital of Yoshida Koreyama is Fernando Villalmil. In real life, Villalmil was a Spanish 19th century admiral. Born in Asturias, he would go on to serve in the Philippines and Cuba. He's credited with the invention of the destroyer type of ship, with the first one being the Destructor, with him providing the blueprints for a British manufacturer to build and then sell to the Spanish Navy. Between 1892 and 1894, he circumnavigated the world on the Nautilus. He spent the last 4-ish months of his life serving in the Spanish-American War, dying at the Battle of Santiago de Cuba on the 3rd of July, 1898. Elsewhere, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that next to Miao, we have our first sighting of the Mori UU, the Murakami Kobaya, a Caravel replacement which is slower, but gets a movement boost in coastal tiles. It heals 10 HP on trade routes and 20 HP on tile improvements, and each adjacent land tile grants it plus 10 combat strength. There's another one near Sakurao, which I'm only mentioning in the hopes Doc Ito pronounces the city's name the same way Baz Battles did in their Battle of Miyajima video. Sakurao. Here we see the stalemated Cree-Mojave War. A Mojave fleet is lurking near Vancouver Island, but since there's no city there, and since no other city on this coast is being attacked, I don't think anything will come of their presence. Cree seems to be attempting a land incursion south of Nishiwayashik, but the Arapaho borders make the approach too narrow for any serious attack. With consistent enough unit production, even if it's tiny, the small number of units will probably be enough for Mojave to hold them off at the hills between the bottleneck and Captain Jack's stronghold. You know what war isn't stalemated? The Mojave invasion of Central America. Indeed, a combined land and sea assault is currently battering down the defenses of Guatemala City. The city's only defense is a cannon. Mojave cuirassiers are approaching, a privateer and a galleon are bombarding the city, and a cavalry unit has blocked off the only road connecting the capital to San Salvador. Things are looking bad for the Morazan. Meanwhile, in the Mariana Islands, Timor-Leste has launched a campaign of conquest. Having already conquered Hucuara Tsehuerve, they are now sieging Capotac Ivalve and have even sent a vanguard to Avi Hamoka. We could see the Mojave Marianas collapse by the end of the episode. Over on this slide, we see Castile retaking Burgos with a Malian response yet to properly materialize. Will it come in the form of a counterattack at said city? Or will it instead turn into a crossing into Andalusia? Or will Mali just not do anything at all? I await to find out with bated breath. Well, not really. Over in the corner, we also see a Norman Equite committing suicide by Amtiman. Over here, we see the much reduced domain of Aten's chosen. Akhenaten is kinda pressured from all sides, yet also under no immediate threat. I'm assuming none of their neighbors wants to bite that warmonger penalty. Akhenaten insists otherwise, however, claiming that the power of Aten himself is defending the city, and the Chadians, Yemenis, and Turks are simply afraid of whatever punishment Aten might dole out should they infringe on the city. His courtiers, who've been doing the actual ruling since the days of the empire being carved up, are only pretending to take these words seriously. They have instead taken to satisfying the masses by inviting them free of charge to great action dramas by John Woo, whose theater works they've been patronizing. In real life, John Woo is a Hong Kongese film director, producer, and scriptwriter, a pioneer in the genres of heroic bloodshed and gun fu, known for his highly chaotic bullet ballet action sequences, stylized imagery, Mexican standoffs, frequent use of slow motion, and allusions to wuxia, film noir, and Western cinema. And the third North Korean Mori War ends predictably and disappointingly, with no border changes and lots of wasted, mostly naval, units. They and the now eliminated Ainu will forever remain the disappointing trio, won't they? It feels kinda weird to see the non-Australian Civ invading Australia being the green and gold one, rather than the other way around. Whatever. We have a fully committed Inca amphibious invasion of the Australian mainland, clearly gunning for Minyanbal, and this is exactly how such an invasion should go. A sizable mixed force of naval units and embarked land units. The only thing left to be desired is the number of units, but even so, the Inca invasion force outnumbers the local Wiradjuri garrison substantially. In focus on this slide is the Mojave Coast and the Ming Vacation Resort. Not much to see here except for Guiyang's large population, a respectable home fleet of the Mojave, and the naval concert of one Screamin' Jay Hawkins. In real life, Screamin' Jay Hawkins was an American singer, songwriter, musician, actor, film producer, and boxer. Famed for his operatic voice delivery and wildly theatrical performances. He sometimes included macabre props on stage, making him an early pioneer of shock rock. He was nominated for an Independent Spirit Award for his side role in Mystery Train, and his most famous song was I Put a Spell on You. Yemen has sent another larger invasion force against Pandya, but it had split its forces into two. The southern force is a healthy mix of ships and embarked Malay troops, but it was also met by a roughly equal Pandyan defense fleet. Even if they win this particular naval battle, the southern force ain't capturing Tutukundi, as Pandya has more than enough ships in reserve. The northern force, on the other hand, is made up of a naval frontal group escorting an embarked trebuchet, with the embarked Malay units trailing behind them. They also encountered a Pandyan defense fleet, but this one is outnumbered, so the Yemenis might have a chance at a breakthrough here. However, once again, the Pandya have a naval reserve off Kerala and a Zulu presence on the Lakshadweep, and Indonesian and Zulu units on the sea split the battle sea into a number of choke points, further favoring the defenders. Yemen will need to send more reinforcements to this front if they hope to make gains. A different Yemeni force is clearing out the seas of Pandya's Deccani territories, but unless there's a coastal city there, which I don't recall one, they're wasting their efforts. Anyways, speaking of wasting efforts, we have a near-dead Afghani Ulan trying to deal damage to Tamantarkhan, with its comrades, 2 of them Ulans, the rest a knight and a line infantry, looking on from a safe distance. Khazaria is weak, but Afghanistan is only investing a few troops into the war, and even if Durrani were to commit more, the narrow, winding approach will stall any assault. The Americans are closing in on Windsor, which has already lost over half its HP. Unless a stupid, on America's part, peace deal is made, it seems like it's only a matter of time before Vermont falls. Prime your F key, folks. And the largely irrelevant war between Yugoslavia and the Anglo-Dutch is over. Casualties, I suspect, were minimal. Damn it, Tito. How do you expect to get back into the top half of the power rankings if you aren't expanding anywhere? Jeez. Attack Kievan Rus or something. Here we see the Okhotsk and Bering Seas, the northern parts of the eastern Japanese Sea, and the northernmost reaches of the Pacific Ocean. Things are mostly peaceful here now, save for a few raiding Mojave frigates. The Gok Turks and Cree are rebuilding their lands, cities, and armies. Mori is peeking up from the south. Ainu and Seminole remnants found refuge with the Cree and Gok Turks respectively, and units from Angola, Brandenburg, the Inca, Vladimir, Han, Kokang, and North Korea have come to say, hi. Tupac, you had a strong invasion force. You had started dealing damage to Minyabal. You had even weakened the garrison force. Why, for Inti's sake, have you pieced out now? Heck, could have at least asked for the city in the peace deal. But no, you just stopped there. just short of bringing back the green and gold color scheme to Australia. Well, in all fairness, the Inca have made great gains in this war, capturing 4 Wiradjuri cities and settling a new one of their own, establishing a strong Pacific core stretching from Papua to Atacama, and with it a potential base for future conquests against the Wiradjuri and the Maori, and the potential to contest with Timor-Leste and Mojave. While Inca may have a dominant position on sea, on land they're floundering. Their attempted counteroffensive towards San Salvador has failed, and a large Rio Platense army is now descending on Machu. They've yet to deal any damage, but there are no Incan reinforcements on the horizon, so I like the Rio Platense chances here. While a general colleague of his is dealing with that, General Bertrand du Guesclin has gone through an Andean mountain pass to personally reconnoiter the environs of Quito. In real life, Bertrand du Guesclin was a lesser noble from Brittany who distinguished himself during the chaos of the 100 Years' War. After the great English victories in the Edwardian War and the Breton Succession War, Bertrand became a leader of one among many routiers, or free companies, active in the region throughout the war. He was eventually employed by the new French king, Charles V, and was promoted to Constable of France, which in military matters made him second only to the king. His strategy of raiding English supply lines and shadowing their movements in order to logistically destroy them would define the French war effort over the Caroline War, which, combined with Castilian naval support, would eventually lead to a French victory. England forced to cede all of its Aquitanian conquests and half of its northern conquests. The Mojave brought plenty of land and slightly less naval reinforcements and captured Guatemala City. Some Central American units materialized for a counterattack to relieve the capital, but too little, too late. I doubt they'll even survive now that such overwhelming Mojave forces have arrived. Central America would have to be insanely lucky to survive this. Over here, we see the consolidating Inca gains in Melanesia, with the newly settled city of Puluchu and a highlight on Cocacas M'Aa. I planned to go in depth in who this guy is/was in real life, but unfortunately, searching for info up on the nets came up with only irrelevant, mostly Turkish and Serbo-Croatian results. Well, there you go. Where the old national government made peace with the Anglo-Dutch, the new progressive government secured a peace with Mali. This was an absolute embarrassment for Mali. Yugoslavia's Saharan territories of Split and Pristina should have been easy pickings, but those absolute buffoons neglected to put a melee unit in front and just uselessly sieged the former. Right after redeeming itself with its conquests against Tetuan, Mali has once again made itself a laughingstock, and I, for one, am all here for it. Yugoslavia's defensive victory here may have been a result of the enemy's stupidity more than our successes, but a victory is still a victory. I think I'm going to celebrate by listening to some partisan songs later. Meanwhile, Turkey has now entered the modern era, only an episode behind the Kayapo. Windsor has fallen. Press F to pay respects to Vermont. There are a few units still milling about, led by General Juan Perón, in real life a past president of Argentina and founder of the eponymous Peronism ideology, but I think it's safe to say that Vermont has been eliminated at 50th place. Vermont was never a good civ in this run. They settled a few cities, but their attempt to ally with fellow small civ Seminole to knock America down a peg or two backfired spectacularly, and both lost a city, in Vermont's case Montpelier, as a result. If I recall correctly, Montpelier didn't even fall to an invading army, but a peace deal. Their far-flung Icelandic colony was lost to Greenland after an otherwise inconclusive war, and they were able to lie low for many episodes since, until last episode apparently saw a large coalition form against them, I assume under a similar mimetic drive like the older Kilwa Delenda Est movement. Unfortunately for them, their bigger neighbor was part of that coalition, and had crushed their resistance like one might splat a fly. Meanwhile, a combination of Vladimir handing away its biggest city to Lithuania in the peace deal last episode, and Vladimir and the Permians having open borders resulted in an opening of a second southern front in the Permian-Lithuanian War. A large Permian army is descending on Suzdal, with few Lithuanian units around to defend it. The city has only started taking damage, but Azike definitely has a stronger hand in this battle. Sundiata, hearing of Vermont being eliminated by America, decided that if he couldn't be the one to eliminate Vermont, he'll take vengeance on the Eliminator instead, declaring war on his oh-so-recent ally. Mali doesn't seem to have mobilized a fleet in the region for this, though, so I think Tiwanaku is safe. Also, Mali retook Burgos. Yemen is sending a third invasion force, this time much more consolidated, a denser group of units in the same area, with some diversionary vessels and embarkments further south. A part of the Pandyan Navy seems to have taken the bait, too, weakening the force defending the main approach towards Maldives, Lakshadweep, and Kerala. With some reinforcements and a little bit of luck, I could see Yemen breaking the ad hoc defenses Pandya has on the main approach and laying siege to Tutukundi. However, the Pandyan admiral, Edward Teach, is not going to go down without a fight, and is determined to stop the Yemenis as far away from any city as possible. In real life, Edward Teach, more famously known as Blackbeard, was one of the greatest pirates in early modern history. Instead of talking about him myself, I'm going to redirect you to Epic History TV's video about him, which will be in the description. Chad and the Normans end their inconclusive war, signing a white peace. The war proved to be little more than a graveyard for the fallen and an XP farm for the surviving. Greenland DOW'd America, presumably to retake Holsteinsborg. The two sides seem evenly matched on the front line, but how the war develops depends on how quickly they can reinforce the front line. Here we have an image of a Comanche inquisitor taking a swim in a lake southwest of the Rio Grande. I'm not sure which lake it is. I tried looking at maps for a suitable real-life lake, but Lake Presa El Cuchillo is just a little bit too southeast, while Lake Don Martin is a bit too far northwest. Was Monterrey perhaps built over a lake that no longer exists in real life? Let me know in the comments. The Mojave and the Cree have made peace, ending exactly where they started, at the Columbia River. The Central American Army has been relegated to just one musketman, and their navy consists of just a caravel and a galleass, who are already engaging in battle with a Mojave galleon. The Mojave Land Army, consisting of cuirassiers, cavalry, field guns, line infantry, and crossbowmen, is closing in and has already started dealing damage to San Salvador. Prime your F key, folks. This episode might just become a double elimination. Over in the East European Arctic, the Permians founded the city of Kuva and then used it as a jumping-off base to launch an amphibious assault on Anik Sky. For whatever reason, Azuke seems to really want that specific miserable Arctic city, focusing nearly all his units on this front at it, leaving the Kuva-Expera line virtually defenseless. If the Vladimirans, Yugoslavs, and Kievans weren't so obstructive, this would present a good opportunity for a Lithuanian counterattack. Here we have a look at the Greater Antilles, neatly divided between the Muisca and America. A war between them would be very interesting to... Wait a second. There. At Detroit. Is that? Yep, he's back. Henry Morgan, veteran of the CBR Mark I and Mark II, has made his appearance in this season as a great admiral in service to America. Kind of fitting, seeing as he revived America in Mark II that one time. Usually I'd talk about the historical figure of a great person, but I just gotta get a Mark II nostalgia load off my tongue. Conqueror of the Maya, Portugal, and Morocco, waged successful wars against the Inca, Mali, Chile, Mexico, and even managed to put the eventual winner Brazil to shame at one point. Dominating nearly all the Caribbean seaboard, half of South America, a big chunk of Africa, and Iberia, Henry Morgan's was truly an empire to be reckoned with. But the first Orange Containment project saw it heavily weakened, even more so after the Brazilian betrayal. Finland kicked them out of mainland Europe, while some of the cities they lost to the Boers were taken by Iceland. When Parks arrived to crush the Bucks, Brazil and the Inuit came to their defense. Ultimately, like every other civ in the Mark II, the Bucks would be forced to join the Eternal Carnival. It's great to see you again, you magnificent bastard. Mali and Castile are skirmishing off the coast of Andalusia and the Algarve. Although Mali is certainly stronger than Castile, I do think they're getting a bit overconfident here, as they believe they can rush through the rest of Castile and then go on to invade the Anglo-Dutch, whom they've just DOW'd. Meanwhile, in the Cree capital of Sipiwininiwak, construction has been finished on a museum that contains a pyramid of glass. The Louvre grants +2 culture, a free great artist, and +4 great works of art slots. Useless in a domination game, but still pretty cool. The Inca and the Normans declare war on the Anglo-Dutch. These wars are of little concern to William, however. The Inca are far away, and the Normans only have one unit that can attack them, as Yugoslav and Malian tiles are preventing naval forces from engaging, and a Kokangese scout is occupying the only land tile on the border. Over here, we see the messy borders of Madagascar and the surrounding seas. If it were to come to a war, Kilwa has a slight edge over the Zulu, but I don't expect serious gains from either side. We now get to the government overview slides. The Mojave, the Arapaho, and Mali are all imperial dynasties. Mali seems to still be going on with the traditional factions, as the heirs dominate the empire's politics. The Mojave and the Arapaho, however, have already risen to party politics, with the former being ruled by the Socialist Workers' Rally, while the latter is under the rule of the National Arapaho Patriotic Group. All of the merchant leagues visible here, Ming, Greenland, Chile, Chad, and Pandia, are still in the era of factional politics, with the former two dominated by their merchant guilds, and the rest by their aristocrats. Finally, we have the military dictatorships, with Egypt still stuck in factional politics, with the military dominating, while Turkey is under the rule of the conservative Turkish anti-immigration Forward Path. Monarchies are the most common government type around here. Of the 10 on screen, 8 are still in factional politics, with Mori, the Anglo-Dutch, the Maori, and the Normans dominated by the bourgeoisie, the Massagette dominated by the nobility, the Modoc and Anglo-Norse governments in exile dominated by populists, and the Kwak government in exile dominated by citizens. The Philippine government in exile is ruled by the National Patriotic Path, and the Permians by the Progressive People's Path. Since this slide and the next slide are almost the same, I'll focus on the living monarchies here and exiled monarchy on the next slide. Out of those with factional politics, the Gokturks, Vladimir, and Ireland are dominated by the bourgeoisie, while the Muisca, Castile, and the Zulu are dominated by their nobility. As for those with party politics, Brandenburg is ruled by the National Law and Justice Commune, while Bengal is ruled by the Green Anti-Industry Democracy Syndicate of Bengal. Babylon, which has been marked as in exile from where though, is somewhat amusingly ruled by the Kokang United Fellowship. Even more hilariously, Brazil's government in exile is ruled by the Progressive Afghan People's Congress. Next up are the principalities. Tetuan is the only one of them with factional politics, dominated by its citizens. Kokang is ruled by the National Kokang United Fellowship, while Yemen is ruled by the Socialists. We also get half of the republics on this slide. 3 of these are still in factional politics: the Seminole government in exile dominated by its nobility, the Vermontian government in exile dominated by its oligarchs, and Rio de la Plata dominated by populists. As for the other republics, all with party politics, both Uganda and Yugoslavia seem to be ruled by national parties under the Patriotic Path and Liberal Democratic Path respectively, while Timor-Leste is ruled by the Green Constitutional Anti-Industry Alignment and the Inca by the Social Democratic Social Fraternity. The second half of the republics is much less advanced on average. Of the 7 of them, 6 are still in factional politics, with the Ainu government in exile and Khazaria dominated by their oligarchs, whilst Botswana, Lithuania, North Korea, and Angola are dominated by populists. America, who's in party politics, is currently ruled by the socialist left bloc. Other than that, this slide also features tribal confederacies, with Kievan Rus dominated by its faction of elders, and the Kayapo ruled by the nationalist Black Forces of Kayapo party. Finally, there's one government in exile that still hasn't yet graduated from the level of a tribe, and yet, somehow, already rose to party politics. The Comanche government in exile is run by the Socialist Workers' Rally. Here we see a shot of America consolidating its Vermontian gains while also sending fleets to war with Greenland, and honestly, but for that fleet, America is looking mostly barren in military terms. Meanwhile, at Washington, the band Pink Floyd is holding a concert. In real life, they were a progressive rock band active from the 1960s to the 1990s, and occasionally returned for events and concerts for a brief time in the decades since. Although I can't remember any songs' names off the top of my head, I certainly know I've listened to some. My parents, and probably some of my extended family too, will probably enjoy the mention of them. Ivan the Terrible needs no introduction. A mid-16th century Tsar of Russia, it was during his reign that Russia secured its hold over the Volga Basin, conquering the Kazan and Astrakhan Khanates, as well as crossing into Siberia, conquering the Sibir Khanate. His participation in the Livonian Wars and just wars against the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in general had much less permanence in terms of gains, though. Ivan was also the leader of Muscovy in the first season of CBRX, with a more lackluster record. There, he acted more like the sandwich filling between more powerful civs like the Sami, Prussia, the Goths, and the Kazakhs. Elsewhere on this slide, not much seems to be happening, though a scattering of Malian, Castilian, and American units are active. Are there maybe going to be joint Castilian-American operations against Burgos and Kristianshob? Let's wait and see. Now, BV did include a very polite note about the pronunciation of that particular city name. Very helpful, thank you. In my defense, you're the first narrator to include the overring diacritic on the name, and I've never actually been able to hear it pronounced, so I will take your word for it and proceed accordingly going forward. Han has declared war on the Anglo-Dutch, giving us an excuse to look at their core. There is a good amount of Han units in the west of the Empire and several smaller concentrations or at least garrisons elsewhere, but the land is mostly barren. What's kinda odd and somewhat worrying for Han fans, though, is the sizable concentration of Tuvan units surrounding Chang'an, stretching over what's in real life Shanxi province, Ningxia AR, easternmost parts of Gansu province, and the Ordos Loop area within Inner Mongolia. I don't know. I think a coalition of at least some of Han's neighbors could deal plenty of damage there right now. Ireland also declared on the Anglo-Dutch, but I'm kinda questioning the viability of the choice, if I'm being honest. There's a large concentration of naval units outside The Hague, so they could reasonably nab Rotterdam. Oviedo, despite a much lower defense stat, may be a bit tougher to crack, seeing as very few Anglo-Dutch units are directed towards there, but I reckon they might be able to turn it into a flipfest. Ireland's choice of enemy wasn't necessarily bad, but it was a bit premature in my opinion. Maybe better mobilize or at least better position your army and navy before declaring war next time, Collins. Rio Platense units are approaching and dealing damage to Machu, defended by a single crossbowman, the defense of the city led by a certain Stanislav Konieczpolski. Will the city hold out long enough for Tupac to build and send a relief force? Probably not, but we'll see. In real life, he was a general in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth Army during the early and mid-17th centuries. He served in the Dimitriads, a series of Russo-Polish conflicts that almost saw the Commonwealth conquer Russia before ultimately failing to, as well as in the Moldavian Magnate Wars, where the Commonwealth, Ottomans, and Habsburgs contended over which of their preferred candidates would rule the principality, and would eventually be captured by the Ottomans in 1620, but upon his release in 1623, he went on to defeat the Tatars multiple times. Stanislav would go on to fight Gustavus Adolphus's Swedes, managing to defend Polish possessions in Prussia and Pomerania, and fought Cossack rebels and Tatar raiders. He rose through the ranks to eventually become the Commonwealth's Grand Hetman, the highest military authority after the king himself. He defeated the Ottomans again at Kamenets-Podolski in 1634, and then won his most famous victory over the Tatars at Akhmatov in 1644. He died just 2 years later. Mojave is tightening the noose around San Salvador, bringing the city to half health, and with 2 naval units as its only defense. Afghanistan is still failing to make any progress against Tamantarkan. More Ulans and cuirassiers are crossing the border, but I don't like their chances. The approach to the city is far too narrow, and no artillery support is being provided. Over here, we see the Inca enjoying their Pacific possessions. The cities look healthy, but perhaps I overestimated their ability to project power here. Most of their naval power is in the west, leaving the eastern cities with just garrison forces, if even that. Highlighted here is also Syed Ali Shah. I don't think that the results Google gave me are the ones I'm looking for, seeing as the one it's giving me is a Kashmiri Islamist separatist leader. Here we have a nice shot of Kokang's empire. Nice cities, a large army and navy, defensible terrain, and a failing invasion of Cambodia. Let's take a look at Kalanimus of Alexandria then. In real life, he was an Eastern Roman navarch, or admiral, who served as the commander of the naval forces in the Mandalic War, Justinian's reconquest of Africa. He's said to have looted goods from local merchants, thus directly defying Belisarius's orders. When prosecuted, he swore under oath that he was innocent, so he was discharged and allowed to retire to Constantinople, where he died from a seizure. Over here, we get a nice view of the Brandenburgian Corps, with a mid-sized but advanced army. We also see Thornton Wilder, in real life an American playwright and 3-time winner of the Pulitzer Prize. Off to the side, we see the Hague fleet split into 2 prongs, one moving into the Straits of Dover, the other sailing north. Over here, we see the peaceful land of the Blue Sibs, focusing mostly on Tuva and the Gokturks. Both have sizable armies, both a mix of outdated and more modern units. The Americans seem to have made a little bit of headway against the Greenlanders, but this is far from a breakthrough still. The course of the war still hangs in the balance. Also, wow, no wonder the Anglo-Dutch invasion went nowhere. Tito left Yugoslavia to enroll as a general in the Greenlandic army. It's taking me all of my power to not make a sentence that will spoil a future slide. Leading the Rio Platense charge at Machu is Erwin Rommel, arguably the most famous of Germany's World War II generals. Good timing, for back on the 6th of March, when I was the only student attending the modern history class at university, the professor talked a lot about the man's participation in the war. From his role on the Western Front, to his arrival to Libya, to the back-and-forth chasing across the desert, to El Alamein, the Great Retreat, Tunisia, return to the Western Front, to eventually his suicide after a failed coup attempt, one he refused to participate in, but also didn't blow the whistle on. San Salvador has finally fallen, and with a half-dead Caravel, the only Central American military unit on screen, we can safely say that Morazon has been eliminated at 49th place. Central America suffered from a lack of action. They failed to settle into Mexico while the Mojave were distracted, or later take advantage of what was, at the time, Mojave's lack of units to invade their Mexican cities. They failed to expand at the Seminoles' expense fast enough, allowing America to swoop in. They fell behind technologically. Their first war with the Muisca started, ironically, somewhat promisingly, but quickly turned against them. The Second War proved much more destructive, costing them 3 cities. Both the Muisca and the Inca briefly captured the capital, but it was the newly ascendant Mojave that would provide the final death knell of Central America. F. A Castilian force is moving in to retake Burgos. A Malian counterforce is also in the area, preparing to sink the embarked units and flip the city should it fall. Nothing much else to note on this slide. No siree. Machu is still under pressure from the Rio Platense, but the only reinforcements that came was Paul McCartney. Presumably, his role is to lift the morale and spirit of the field cannon crews making up the garrison. In real life, Paul McCartney is, the rest of the slide is just a direct quote of Wikipedia, an English singer, songwriter, and musician who gained worldwide fame with the Beatles, for whom he played bass guitar and shared primary songwriting and lead vocal duties with John Lennon. One of the most successful composers and performers of all time, McCartney is known for his melodic approach to bass playing, versatile and wide tenor vocal range, and musical eclecticism, exploring genres ranging from pre-rock and roll pop to classical, ballads, and electronica. His songwriting partnership with Lennon remains the most successful in history. Over here, we see most of the Timor-Leste Empire more or less in focus, tightening their grip over their recent gains, as well as the Incan Papuan territory, where Filippo Brunelleschi is thinking up new architectural styles. By this point, I've become too lazy and tired to type stuff out about these great people, so for Brunelleschi, I'll just redirect you to OSP's Renaissance Antics video, where Brunelleschi is, thankfully, the first guy talked about. Once again, link in the description. Botswana and Tuva have DOW'd Afghanistan. The former is relevant, but the latter has a Tarim Basin front line between their isolated outpost city of Ijma and the Afghani mountain pass fortress city of Jalandhar. The terrain on both sides favors the defender, but I think Tuva will probably try offense first, which kinda sucks for them, seeing as they're slightly technologically behind the Afghans. Afghanistan has also built the Brandenburg Gate, earning +1 culture, +2 great scientist points, a free great general, and +15 XP for all units built in the city the Brandenburg Gate was constructed in. Nifty. The Permians accepted a peace deal from Han, and to celebrate, they mount pressure of Suzdal, reducing it to 40% health. No unit is in position to capture the city yet, but things are getting more dire on this front for Lithuania. For whatever reason, we're now shown a slide of the large Castilian city of León. It is a nice city, and the Castilian fleet in the Bay of Biscay is kinda nice to look at, I guess. But I'm guessing this is mostly supposed to be a breather slide. Oh, hey, Mori is enjoying a golden age. Good for them. As a bloodthirsty Babylonian, I'm disappointed. But as someone who prefers Lithuania over the Permians, I'm relieved. Lithuania and the Permians have made peace. No stupid city exchanges happen, and it's also quite difficult to judge whether Annexiai ended up Lithuanian or Permian. I think it's Lithuanian, but we'll need someone with better eyes than mine to take a look at the minimap. Good thing I'm getting glasses on the day of the PRs. In this shot, we see Ireland in most of its glory, as well as the Brandenburgian island colonies. The Anglo-Dutch seem to be making a move on these lands, potentially trying to strike at Galway and Baltimore. Brandenburg, meanwhile, got a new great writer in the form of Zygmunt Krasinski. In real life, he was a poet, remembered as one of the 3 bards, Polish Romanticist poets who influenced national consciousness. His most famous works include The Undivine Comedy, Psalm to the Future, Iridion, and Pre-Dawn. The Tuvan expansion in Han territory has moved south into the area southeast of Jianye and around Longbian, and I finally realized what the Tuvan's purpose here is. Tuva is at war with Ming, and this force moving through Han lands is supposed to be Tuva taking what would otherwise be an irrelevant war seriously. For the most part, Ming seems to be able to parry them technologically. The only field where Tuva has the edge here is their more advanced artillery. Let's see if that'll be enough to capture Fuzhou. I wouldn't bet on it, but one can hope. We finally see which city the Brandenburg Gate was built in. Jammu. Moving on. Oh, fuck. Brandenburg has just DOW'd Yugoslavia. Taking good advantage of Tito's absence, I see. No matter, the republics and autonomous provinces are taking charge of the war effort, with differing levels of efficiency. Brandenburg is strong, and the threat its army poses to Zagreb is very real, but I have trust that Yugoslavia will be able to pull through, its army bloodied and cities damaged, but borders intact. On the other side of the world, Chile DOWs Kokang, hoping to snatch some undefended Antarctic colonies. At the same time, the Gokturks DOW Mori, presumably hoping to nab Usukeshi and maybe Miri Takamatsu. For a historically steppe nomadic empire, the CBRX Gokturks seem to have eagerly embraced the sea, seen in their earlier successful conquest of the Ainu, and now the naval invasion of Mori. A sizable fleet is descending on northern Japan, and reinforcements from both sides will be somewhat slow to arrive. Leading the Gokturk charge is Admiral Alvaro de Bazan, his eyes firmly poised on the former final Ainu holdout of Usukeshi. In real life, Alvaro de Bazan was a 16th century Spanish nobleman and admiral, notable for his participations in Spain's capture of Vélez de la Gomera, a rock in Morocco that's under Spain's rule to this day, the Christian relief force to the Great Siege of Malta, the quelling of the Morisco Revolt, the Battle of Lepanto, the 1573 Spanish recapture of Tunis, the Spanish incorporation of Portugal, and the capture of the last Portuguese anti-Spanish holdout in the Azores. In an interesting reversal of the usual shtick in the Yemeni Pandian War, a Pandian galleon is bombarding Yemen's Mauritian colony of Jibla. The city won't fall to that ship, and I'm not sure the other one to the northeast is going to be enough either, especially with that Yemeni frigate right there. Over here, we have a look at the Wiradjuri Corps, with a respectable fleet and the closest thing Wiradjuri has to a larger-than-a-garrison army. The citizens of Bungambrata, the largest city on the slide, are enjoying a concert by the Smiths, in real life an English rock band whose style fuses 60s rock and post-punk. America, tired of seeing Castile and Mali constantly flip Burgos between them, decided to swoop in, capture the now one-pop city, and burn it to the ground. Any Malian unit is too far to retake the city in time to save it. America is holding a firm advantage over Greenland now, even landing troops on Vinland, with a near-dead line infantry even dealing damage to Egedesiminde. The city isn't under any real threat of falling, and it's very likely the American landings will be pushed right back into the sea, but this is still a worrying sign for the Greenlanders. The Tuvans have finally reached the Ming border, initiating their attack. However, things seem to have started on the wrong foot for them there. Rivers and Han units certainly aren't helping the Tuvans either. The Mojave adopt the communism ideology, with Iritaba promising to emancipate the workers of the world and establish equality through class struggle. What the means to this end would be, and whether that end will ever be reached, is up to question. Turkey keeps sending a ship and a bunch of embarked units to besiege Novgorod with minimal success. Cuirassiers and line infantry and... Are those fucking chimeras? What the fuck are they doing in the modern era? Is this a bug? What? Predictably, the Tuvan-Afghan war has descended into a stalemate, as damaged Tuvan units are slowly trying to make their way into Afghan territory. In their way are Jalandhar's line infantry garrison, a unit of Uhlans, and our first sighting of the Afghan UU, the Jazelchi, a cavalry replacement that has 4 combat strength points less than cavalry, but compensates for that with +1 range, plus 34 ranged combat, as well as a 20% attack boost on hills and a 10% combat strength boost in friendly territory. And with that, Burgos is gone. The American galleon that burned it down now lays near dead outside Tegdaoust. Meanwhile, its Malian counterpart ran into a Kayapo fleet. While the Tuvan Expeditionary Force is being ground down at the border, Han is just kind of vibing here. Helping them is the concert in Jingyang, held by the band Joy Division. In real life, Joy Division is yet another English rock band. The band was only active for 4 years, as one of its members committed suicide, but they did win some fame, particularly with their songs Closer and Love Will Tear Us Apart. An irrelevant war ends as Indonesia and the Massagetè make peace. And right on cue, 2 irrelevant wars begin, as Kokang and the Anglo-Dutch declare on Botswana, giving us an excuse to take a look at the latter and their unit carpet. What's with that weird salient of Zulu territory stretching from Maun to Salibe Fuike, though? Over here, we see the Tuvan-Permian border, and a contrast is immediately obvious. Having previously overcommitted to the Lithuanian War, the Permians left their Tuvan border almost entirely defenseless. If Tuva declared now, they could easily snatch a city or two. Speaking of, Tuva also accepted a peace deal from the Massagetè. There's also a Dusty Springfield concert in Pyrrhus. In real life, she was a pop singer from the 50s to the 90s, and was an icon of the swingin' 60s. Timor-Leste has declared war on the Anglo-Dutch, but these pay them no mind, as their fleet is engaged in bloody battle against the Irish fleet and a Norman privateer off the coast of Rotterdam, which has also suffered a bit of damage. Oviedo is undamaged, but the Anglo-Dutch are increasing the pressure there too, and while their chances at Rotterdam are rapidly waning, they may yet luck out here. Yemen, too, had adopted the communism ideology, no doubt to strengthen ties with their bigger northern neighbor. Speaking of said neighbor, Turkey has built 2 new wonders. The first is Neuschwanstein, providing plus 6 gold, plus 2 happiness, plus 4 culture, and plus 1 great merchant points, as well as giving every city with a castle plus 3 gold, plus 2 culture, and plus 1 happiness each. The second is the Kremlin, which grants plus 1 culture and plus 1 great scientist points, as well as a free social policy and plus 50% armor unit production in the city in which it was built. Timor-Leste has entered the modern era. The future looks bright and promising for this prosperous empire. Also, no sooner had he made peace with her does Donduk Kular start plotting against Tamiris again. For our final shot of the episode, we take a glance at Istanbul, where the Kremlin was built. Also, I will note, I find it very weird how none of the wonders built this episode were built by Kayapol. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of the CBRX Season 3. I hope you enjoyed my narration. Put some commentary, constructive criticism, and other feedback in the comments. Have a nice day, week, month, etc. This is BV, saying ciao. And I'll join our esteemed narrator in wishing you a pleasant time unit of your choice. Doc Ito, signing off.